wants and look to get the player sales done. You have to say Andrea Berta for a first window has done unbelievable. So let's hope that we're talking about that in the next coming weeks, because I do really feel like there's a lot of people that are looking at Andrea Berta as a magician, if you get me. They're expecting him to be the magician. They're expecting him to do the unthinkable. They're expecting him to bring in a team that's going to be like, right, this is now ready. Now over to Mikel Arteta. And I think that is a lot of pressure for a guy who's literally just walked into a job a few weeks ago.
Numerous spinning plates.
Exactly. The guy's been spinning plates. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there needs to be a certain amount of pressure. I don't want to be allowing him to walk in and be like, yeah, you give yourself 6-7 months, mate. Sit in.
We ain't got that time.
We don't have that time. And this is why we've brought him in. The CV that he has is an impressive one. And it is one that says I can bring in players, I can sell players, and I've got a CV that says I can win with a manager and be at the elite. And that's what he did at Atletico Madrid. So I'm expecting him to do all he can to allow Arsenal to be that. And, you know, just lastly, I think what we have to do is then wait for that window to close. And then we say to him, do you know what? You put your feet up now, because you ain't got nothing to do with this pitch. This is all to do with the manager now. You've done your job. You've got the players in. You've signed the players you want to keep. You've sold the players you want to get rid of. And you've provided our manager with the best team and the best chance of winning trophies. So go chill out now. And I think that, you know, get ready for January, because that's how I believe a sporting director should be looked at and viewed upon with the fans. We understand there's work they do behind the scenes that we don't even know about. And we understand there's stuff goes on between that kind of summer and January period. But for me, I think Andrea Berta has got a lot of pressure on him. And I think that so far he's handled it pretty well. We still believe there's stuff to do. We still want players to come in. We still got a couple more positions we're going to be looking at. And we've definitely got some players that we need to move on. But if I'm honest with you, bro, I'm starting to like what he's been doing, and the players he has got across the line, you know, swiftly, I think is massively kind of pivotal into how we signed Victor Gyökeres, which of course Berta was a massive fan of. So I think he's done some good things, man.
I don't think I can disagree with anything you said, and you summed it up well. And that obviously the first thing and the major thing I took away from that is there should be pressure on the players, the manager. Berta, this is a big club. Obviously, we're not winning them where we want to be, and we know what we didn't do last summer and what we needed to do coming into this summer. And I think so far, so good, in it. Like, we know that the people before put the groundwork in place for Zubimendi. All right, you got that over the line. Thomas Partey is obviously not staying. You pivoted to Norgard, whether I like him or not. Obviously, we grabbed all the players that we needed to grab at this moment in time. And I'd imagine the players that Mikel Arteta wanted, like you said, he's doing his job. I do think conversation, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but it's now shifting towards outgoings. But so far, so good, pat on the back. And like you said, you do your job, you kick your feet up for a couple of months. January, you come into the fore again and obviously start, you know, planning for not just this season, but potentially seasons. And not that I'm necessarily saying to scapegoat Mikel Arteta, but the less nonsense around Edu did this, didn't do that, Kroenke this, that, and the other. If you've just got the players and you can deliver, we're happy as Larry. If you don't, there's serious question marks to be asked. Obviously, though, like I promise you, people, we will speak a bit in depth about Gyökeres, but we've got Gyökeres now. The saga of the EZEs and all of these guys is done. Zubimendi's through the door. All of those others are through the door. There's still work to be done, right? But I think me and you have spoken about, and we're quite aligned in that the club are probably going to have to focus on some level of outgoings. It's like you mentioned Berta and what he did at Atletico Madrid. He comes from a financial background. So I think that was obviously going to be like an attraction to the Kroenkes, because we've got a lot of players on big wages. And I think that's where the kind of conversation shifts. Where do you look at the outgoings though, Dan? Because for me, like, I'll give you two options. Do you think it's more of a case of we're not under any PSR issues, we just want to clear ranks before we move in the market again? Or do you feel we're low-key under something in that regards?
I don't think there's any issue with PSR and Arsenal. I just don't. From what we understand, we can only listen to the Kieran Maguires and the financial people in the world. I don't know anything about Arsenal finances. I don't want to. I've got no interest in it whatsoever, bro. I'm a football fan, not an accountant. So I don't care for me what Arsenal sort of spend on players, as long as it's done properly. Like, you know, it doesn't really bother me if you're going to go and lump 290k a week on Havertz, if Kai Havertz is your next Thierry Henry. If he's not, you're going to be asking questions on why you're putting him on that much money, which is what people are doing, right? Same with Gabriel Jesus. We look at Zinchenko, we look at Martinelli, and they're all on unbelievable wages. Now, I don't know many footballers that would say no to Arsenal with those sort of wages. Now, I want our footballers to say yes to Arsenal, and I don't care how much you give me. Not, oh, I'll come to you because I'm in London. You're going to give me 300 grand a week. That shouldn't be how you attract the players.
That should all be extra stuff.
That attract you, right? So I got to be honest with you. I'd look at the financial situation. I don't believe Arsenal should have any issues whatsoever because of how much money we bring in and what we haven't spent in the last few windows. I look at the scenario, if I'm honest with you, of the outgoings, and I don't feel like there's anybody that we can sell that would genuinely bring in a serious amount of money. So therefore, I'm in the scenario thinking just get what you can for the players you do not want. We all know who those players are. There's 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them that aren't really going to
Maybe
be a
more.
part of, the future of Arsenal, or maybe they're not get into the squad this season. You look at the likes of Fabi Vieira and Lokonga and Zinchenko, Reiss Nelson. There's rumors of Trossard, maybe Jesus. None of those players are going to be bringing in 30 or 40 million each. Like, we've just got to be realistic about that. So I think what Andrea Berta's job is now to do is to try and see how much he can get for them and try and look at how he brings this wage structure down to some form of normality. Because there is no way that Gabriel Jesus and Havertz should be the 2 highest paid players at the club when they can't get into the first 11. There's no way that you can go from a club in Spain or Italy and be on £5,000 a week to jump to £125,000 a week. That should not happen. There should be a gradient, of course. If you go and pick up Kivior, who was on £2,000 a week from Spezia, now all of a sudden he's on about £75,000 a week. How do you times your wages by like 40%? Like, do you know, 40 times, sorry, I should say, 40 times your wage. I feel like that is a crazy thing to happen. And Gabriel Martinelli to be on 180k a week, Luis Diaz is on 65 grand a week. That just shows you where Liverpool are at with their kind of wages and where we're at. So I think we are in more of a mess than people realised in terms of wages.
And you
And
look at last season as well, to age your point with the outgoings. I think that is a remit that's been here.
100%, bro. And I think when people forget, like when we were in the doldrums, as people call it, when we were under Emery and Wenger, we had players like Kolasinac on 125k a week. We had David Luiz and Mustafi and Ozils and Aubameyangs and all these guys on crazy money. Hector Bellerin's, Leno, Chakas, El Nenis, and everyone was going, "What are they doing with the wages?"
PTSD, man.
Yeah, but you know what? You get PTSD, but some of these players ain't far off that now, DG. This is the problem. This is what Edu and Arteta have done.
We're back in that kind of mess now.
Yeah, we're back in the mess. Not to that kind of state in terms of finishing outside of the Champions League and trying to drag ourselves back into the top 4. We're not doing that. But in terms of the squad, we're in a very similar scenario because instead of
utilising the resources properly.
No, and instead of Kolasinac being on 125 a week, we've now got Zinchenko on 150 a week. And we can't get rid of him because his wages are a bit higher. Reiss Nelson, I like Reiss. I think he's looked sharp in training, and I hope he goes and does well in his career. But he's on £100,000 a week. Fulham are interested. They're like, Zinchenko and Nelson, I'd like them both, but they're on a
200k wages.
Yeah,
like
250k.
Off ours, but for them, boy.
I don't want to be paying that for Zinchenko and Reiss Nelson. So they're going to have to take wage cuts. Obviously, you've got the Eddie Nketiah situation. It took ages to get him out the door because he was on 100k a week. So, Calafiori, he's unbelievable. Him and Marino came, and all of a sudden, boom, they shoot straight up with their wages. Now, I think it's very attractive that Arsenal can pay people that. I think it's very important because players need to get paid. But you've also got to look at it and say, there's one or two things. We're going to pay you handsomely because we're a big club. That's one scenario. Or we're going to pay you handsomely because I don't really want anyone else to nab you off of us. So we're going to pay you a lot so that you can come here and see, wow, I get paid well here. And I don't know what scenario that is, but Andrea Berta needs to bring that down. I've got no problem with William Saliba and Saka being the highest paid players at the club. Why? Because they're the 2 best players we've got. But when Havertz and Jesus and Martinelli and Zinchenko are on this amount of money and they're hardly getting a kick, something has to change. And I think Andrea Berta is going to have to look at that.
I think you're right, man. And I think obviously what you kind of alluded to is that throughout the years, there's been an evolution in it. Like when Martinelli got the contract, obviously 190k was a bit mad, but we was tying down our key players and obviously he was doing the business. He stagnated and he's potentially one that needs to go out the door. Some would say that around Kai Havertz, especially with Gyökeres coming in. Odegaard as well, potentially. So naturally, we need to get a leash on that. And I'm not trying to scare anyone or whatnot, but logically, if you're William Saliba and you're Bukayo Saka and forget thinking about your career and you can go play for this other team and that other team, not that you're watching what your teammates are getting paid, but your agents are. If they're saying, hang on, Saka's probably going to sell more shirts than a Kai Havertz or a Gabriel Jesus. I'm playing a lot more. You know, I want everyone to be fit, of course, and I wish we lived in an imaginary world where all of these guys were amazing. But, you know, who's more important to the team? And if I know it's football, but if people looked at this from a working environment, there's issues. And obviously, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, Dan, when I look at Berta, because he's come in, he's going to have to clear ranks and do all of that kind of stuff. But as you mentioned, he's having to give new contracts. I don't know how much Magalhaes is earning, but I'd imagine it's something healthy, which is well deserved. Lewis Skelly and Wanyeri, they're not probably breaking our wage bill, but there's an uptake in that. And then obviously you're still paying the several players. You said you brought Gyökeres in. We're hoping for Eze's and Rodrigo's and Leao's and this one and that one. So it's a peculiar situation, but that's where I think, like why I asked you earlier about the PSR thing, I don't think we're under any immediate PSR concerns. Everybody knows we're all on this self-financing thing and stuff. I think any restrictions around incomings or watching the wages, that's purely because of what we want to do. Now, when I look at it from a business point of view, of course, that makes sense. When I bring football into it, which fundamentally, that's all me, you, and everyone in the chat cares about, that's where you're looking at it. So then it leads me to ask you, yeah, like, are you surprised that nobody's left? Because obviously Nelson and Zinchenko, they're linked with moves away. It seems like they might be two to go through the door. They ain't gone anywhere at this moment in time. Zinchenko, obviously, I want him to go, but I am starting to feel if we don't buy a left back, I wouldn't mind him staying. Lokonga's not got a sniff of any level of football on the tour. Fabio Vieira obviously played in the Club World Cup, linked with West Ham, but not really gone anywhere. Kivio links, not that I want him to go, are dead. But like, are you surprised that there's not been any outgoings at all at this moment?
The reason I'm not surprised is because I don't rate any of the players. I've got to be honest with you. Maybe Reiss Nelson is one of the only ones I think could be good business for a club. He's still young. He's got a lot of quality. I think he's looked sharp. I think he's versatile, can play on both wings. And I think that maybe a Palace or a Fulham or a West Ham or maybe even one of the clubs like Leeds or Sunderland would be really interested in taking somebody like Reiss. And I think it would be an excellent signing for them. I don't think he's going to get us a lot of money. I think if I'm honest with you, I'll be very, very unbelievably surprised if we get anywhere near to 15 to 20 million for Reiss Nelson, because he's hardly kicked a ball for us. And when he has kicked a ball for Fulham, he got injured. So I don't think you can expect someone to come in and lump 30 million on Reiss Nelson. At the same time, the way the market's going, you'd like to think we could get at least 15 million for him and maybe throw some add-ons on there and think that's a fair signing. We've got to get better at player sales. I look at the scenario of our players that we've sold for money, and there's only really been recent times that we've got anywhere over 30 million for them. Aaron Ramsdale and Smith Rose and Nketiahs and Baloguns and Joe Willocks. Oxlade-Chamberlain's the only one a few years ago. We got up over 30 million. Iwobi. And then we have to go back to 99 to Anelkas and Overmars and guys like this. So it's been poor, man. It really has. I saw a stat that only Burnley, Sunderland and Brentford are the only three teams that have sold players for less money than Oxlade-Chamberlain at Arsenal. Everybody else in the Premier League has sold somebody for more than what Oxlade-Chamberlain was. So that means Arsenal are down with Burnley, Leeds and who did I say? Brentford, when it comes to that. And obviously Sunderland, who have just been promoted now. They're the only teams. And it might even be that Leeds got more for Rio. It might even just be Burnley, Brentford, and Sunderland, actually, when you look at it. So I look at the scenario and think that's terrible. Arsenal are an elite club, the third biggest club in England on trophies, and the third worst when it comes to player sales. How is that the case? Like, I'm not saying we should go now and sell Saliba for 100 million and go, way. I'm not saying that at all, right? But I think with some of the player sales that Chelsea and Liverpool have done, I think, how can they get 32 million for Ryan Brewster and we get the same for Oxlade-Chamberlain?
They made a profit on Felix and Madueke as well.
Making Chelsea are the best at it. I've got to be honest. I hate them, but they're unbelievably good at it.
They know how to make
money.
They
sell that Humphreys brother who's hardly kicked a ball to Burnley for 15 mil.
And they're selling to themselves with that Strasbourg thing. I'm not saying it's right, but I do look at our club and think, do we have to do this kind of stuff?
It's clever. It's clever how they're doing it. And also Liverpool, like Jordan Ibe, Ryan Brewster, you know, players like you look at and think, how have they got that much money for him? Like
they're making money on sales themselves, Liverpool, really, as well, for all the talk about EZE and this one and that one. Yeah. Like, and Liverpool's structure is probably more akin to ours in terms of how the owners operate. I think there's a lot we can learn from them in terms of like just scouting and things of that ilk. Like, why are we bad at sales? Because obviously it was a different time, but we knew what Arsenal used to do. We'd get Adebayo, all of these guys for pennies, sell them for pounds. Fair enough, we're paying off the stadium, but the premise is still there. We're making a lot of money. Since we've become more financially prudent and things like that, why do you feel like we've not been good at sales, and how do we change that? Because even though I don't necessarily think this might be the case with some of the names we've said, I can't sit here and lie to you and say maybe if Zinchenko, Nelson, Fabio Vieira, this one, that one. I'm not saying they would have been sold for 100 million, but some other clubs might have flogged them off already, or we might be looking at them like, how did they get X amount for that? Which we've seen with Liverpool, because like Liverpool are about to make, I would say, anything from 35 to 50 million if they pull the trigger on even selling a Harvey Elliott. Like, why aren't we good at sales, and how do we get better at that? Like,
The reason we've not been good is it's been poor decision making. Some of it has been poor recruitment and poor lack of clear financial understanding, I should say. I don't want to blame Arsene Wenger and Arteta for everything, but I don't think that they have really been two managers that want to be selling players for lots of money to bring lots of money back into the club. I think they're more interested in the players that they're buying as opposed to the players they're selling, from what you can see. And the only reason I say that is because there's evidence that they don't care how much they're getting for some of these players. How can Emi Martinez go for 17 million and be like one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League? How can Leno go for 3 million to Fulham? How can, Matteo Guendouzi and Bellerin be offered 50 million by PSG and Barcelona links and then end up going for about, pittance? Let's be real. So I think as much as I appreciate some of the sales, and I've gone through ones that have given us a lot of money, and of late it's got better, I think there's been some really bad decision making. And I think there's been some poor understanding of how the system must work, because you can go to Arsenal on evidence on paper and you can look at stats if you want to and figures and think, I'm going to go and buy some players off Arsenal because they don't ask for much. In 2011, Gareth Bale and Cristiano Ronaldo and all of these guys that were being linked were going for like 80 million and 90 million and all this kind of stuff.
Inflation is mad now.
Inflation. And then Fabregas, literally a year before, went for 29 million. Explain how that's good. Like, and I'm not saying that Fabregas is on the same level as Bale or Ronaldo, but there wasn't a 60 million difference between Cesc Fabregas and Ronaldo or Bale. Like, they were clearly better than Fabregas. But at the time, Fabregas was one of the best central midfielders in the world. And we sold him for 29 million to Barcelona. That is poor. We sold Overmars for similar, 4 million less in 1999, bruv. So how can you go nearly 10 years and say that Overmars was £4 million less than Fabregas? Now, Overmars was class, don't get me wrong. But Cesc Fabregas at the time was seen as one of the best central midfielders in the game. And we sold him for £4 million more 10 years later to the same club. That is crazy money. Like, we should have got much more money for Cesc. We should have got much more money for a lot of players that we've sold, to be fair. But I looked at Thierry Henry even. Thierry Henry was the best striker in the world. And people were like, well, he's 28, 29. We can't get much more than 30 million for him.
We accepted less the year after, because remember, he was meant to go the year before as well.
Precisely. Robin Van Persie, another example. £29 million for a 30-year-old striker that's guaranteed to score you 30 goals a year if fit. Oh, we sold him to United, then what did they do when they won the league? So I think we need to look at that and get better at it. And I think that Andrea Berta is the guy that we have to look at and say, please help us, because we haven't been getting it right in the last 2 decades. Well, longer than that, 3 decades.
And even that, for me, it's like, maybe not so much Liverpool, because as I said, I think Liverpool are kind of close in how they operate to us. But where I look at Chelsea, bottomless pits of money, City, bottomless pits of money, not saying definitely City haven't been reckless. I know they've had a poor season, but if spending money was everything, everybody would win the league apart from them. It's about being competent, right? But for me, I think for me anyways, again, this is probably above my pay grade, but if we're really on self-financing and not necessarily spending mad cash, then maybe if we could get more money through our academies system, whether that's getting players in for cheap, selling them for more, the Nelsons and stuff, that when it becomes clear that you can have good careers, you might not make it, maybe tailoring certain moves that we get decent money. Because if you get 10s and 20s and 30 millions for a couple of these players, maybe that could be reinvested, so that when you find yourself maybe wanting to sit at the table for the finances of Rodrigo and this one and that one, we could be a bit more, quote unquote, not reckless, but a bit more reckless in that regard. And even that, because the Cronkies, from a business point of view, this club is amazing for them, essentially. So it would probably make more sense. There was a question, it's gone, yeah, but it's kind of on task. Like, do you think we've improved our depth? Because I do think, on one hand, by default, until Trossard or Martinelli leave, Madueke's there, and we hope Eze, up front, we do have another body. But then I do feel there's an element of one in and one out, like, kind of thing. And I think that was kind of there last season. And what I mean by that is, obviously, Norgard and Zubimendi have come in. Partey and Jorginho have gone. It feels like Tomiyasu and Mosquera. Obviously, Mosquera is going to be about a bit more, but it does feel like one in, one out. So, like, Has the depth improved at this moment?
It's hard to answer that question factually
Mad,
because
innit?
we'll be able to know in sort of October, November time whether we have. Maybe it will get to the new year in 2026 for us to realize whether we've improved as a squad or not, right? But I look on paper and I look at the signings that have come in, and I don't go into too much depth of them because I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit more. But I look at Kepa and I don't think there's much difference, but I think he's probably no worse than Neto, if not a little bit better, right? I look at Mosquera and I like Tomiyasu. But for his availability, Mosquera is clearly no downgrade on Tomiyasu. Because from
We're
what I
going to
see
see him a lot
yesterday,
more.
I actually quite liked him when he came on, right? So I look at Mosquera, I think, do you know what, that could be a potential replacement for Tomiyasu that's no worse because he's going to be fitter than Tomiyasu. Norgard's, I don't think is an upgrade on Jorginho. If I'm honest with you, I would say that's probably one that I would agree is probably not an upgrade. And I don't think that Zubamendi is an upgrade on Partey, but I don't think he's going to be a shambolic signing. Like, oh my God, what have we got here in comparison to Thomas Partey? I think he's going to be a good player for us, right? So I think those two, there's kind of no worse, but definitely no better than in midfield. Madueke is better than Sterling and Nelson. I've got to be honest with you. So that is an upgrade, although it be an expensive one. And we all know that Victor Gyökeres is an upgrade on Kai Havertz and Jesus put together, right? So I would say that in some positions we definitely are stronger. But we need two more players coming in, and it needs to be a left winger and attacking midfielder. And I'm sure we'll touch on that. We've been linked with EZE, and there's obviously the Rafael Leao and Rodrigo talk. I would love
Morgan Rogers now, which I don't care to believe.
Rogers, I'd love, bruv.
But he'd be amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Bruv, if we can't get Rodrigo or Leao or one of these big names, I'd take EZE and Rogers tomorrow. I think that'd be an unbelievable couple of signings. And, you know, from what I'm being told, we've got money. So with player sales on top of that, I imagine we've got even more. So I think those two signings would be unbelievable, both homegrown players as well. And yeah, I feel like there has been upgrades in certain positions. I think a lot of you can look at it two ways, right? And we don't know until the ball starts being played. But what I will say is this: you could look at it in two ways and go, Kepa is an absolutely shambolic keeper, just like Neto was. You could look and say Mosquera is a young kid who's not proven. I'd rather have Tomiyasu because when he's fit, he's quality. I look at Norgard and think he's got no legs. What was the point? We might as well have just kept Jorginho. And Thomas Partey is better than Zubamendi. Madueke is no better than Sterling or Nelson because he's only going to play. And Gyökeres is the only one that improves us. You could look at it like that if you want. And I don't think you'd be miles off what you're saying. But I would say it's a very pessimistic outlook before anyone's kicked any balls, right?
Yeah.
So you can also do the same and you can go, Kepa, unbelievable business. What a goalkeeper. 75 million not long ago. We got him for 5. Look at Mosquera, one of the most up-and-coming players in the league. We've got him for cheap. He's better than everything we've got in backup. You can also look at Norgard and say, what a captain, what a Premier League proven player. Cheap money, excellent business. Zubamendi, the wanted player that everyone had in their books on DM in Europe. Then you look at Madueke, a player that's come in who's very versatile, can cut inside, a one-on-one demon. He looks like an excellent bit of business. We're linked with EZE and Rodrigo, and we've got Gyökeres, the top goal scorer in Europe. Two different ways of looking at it, but there's a set of fans over here saying we ain't done nothing, and a set of fans that going, wow, it's a 9 out of 10 window.
Where the shoot's in the middle.
Someone's wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? Somebody's wrong. So we're going to have to wait and find out in February, March time who's right and who's wrong, because I don't think you can look at it now. And, you know, Kenny Ken, big him up, says it right. Wait until April, May to give it a rating out of 10. Don't say now, it's a 9 out of 10 window, and you get to May and you won nothing and think, wasn't it a 9 out of 10 window? So he's right, man. You can only look at what you've got in front of you now. I think until it starts playing ball, we're not going to have a clue about whether it's great or not. So,
I mean, I can't bring it towards 9s and 10s unless I see, like, I go wow about some sales. Like when I heard the Gabriel Jesus links, I thought, well, the guy's injured. Who's going to buy him? And obviously he ain't gone nowhere, but that's when I'm like, okay, but I see what you're doing. Obviously, kind of piggybanking off what you said. I think everyone's at that point. We hope Berta can surprise us. If he could get, I don't know, 30 million for Fabio Vieira or something decent for Reiss Nelson, we'll be like mad. But we just want to clear wages potentially. I'm in the middle because on one hand, I can't, and the club, I don't want to give the club credit necessarily because I do think you know, in previous windows, you might have known you've needed a left winger and a striker. You might have got away with either, but because of where we're at now, you need to address everything in it. I think we've addressed certain areas. I still want the EZEs and this one and that one, as you kind of said, but we've addressed areas. It feels like it's finally the window where we're going for everything that's required. Whether I believe in the depth or the ability, or some players that I'm bullish on fail to deliver, or some players I weren't rating do amazing. It is what it is, which kind of goes back to what you said about Kenny saying, you know, wait until next year, essentially. For me, though, I still don't know for depth. I still would like a left back, and I'm going to double down on that. I actually think we've only got, at this moment in time, 2 game changers. Like, I actually, listen, I liked Partey when he was here. I think Zubimendi's